Niga and Aiga were a hard-working couple, living a simple life in a small village. Every morning, Niga, with some help from Aiga, would wake up before dawn to fry samosas and donuts, which they sold outside the school where their son Olupo studied. The students adored Niga's snacks. "Auntie Samosa, give me 2, give me 1, they would call out with excitement. The little business grew, and the money they made helped pay for their needs. Life was good, but every bright day came with shadows. The canteen woman inside the school noticed her sales were dropping, all because of Aiga and Niga's thriving unregistered stall. She only sold biscuits, and the students no longer found them appealing compared to the hot samosas and fresh donuts. Furious, the canteen woman complained to the headmaster, who soon called Aiga and Niga to his office. "I'm afraid you'll have to stop selling here," he said kindly, but his words cut deep. "It's affecting the school's canteen, which is an actual registered business." Aiga and Niga pleaded, but there was nothing to be done. They were asked to leave the place near the school gate, and with that, the main source of income was gone. That night, as they sat around their dimly lit kitchen, tears rolled down Niga's cheeks. "What will we do now?" she whispered. Aiga stared at the ground, lost in thought. Olupo, sitting quietly, wiped his eyes, but tried to stay strong. "We will find a way," Niga finally said, her voice steadier than ever. "I will go to the city and find work. You will stay here and take care of Olupo. We can't give up." And so, Niga packed her things and left for the city, while Aiga remained in the village with Olupo, taking up a few gigs with the bricklayers to make ends meet. Months passed, and Niga found work as a cook at an expensive school in the city. She sent money home regularly, and soon she hired a maid to help Aiga and Olupo with house chores. The maid Nwani was a quiet girl, a few years older than Olupo. When Nwani arrived at their house, Aiga greeted her with a smile, and Olupo shyly waved. They were relieved to have the housework lifted off their shoulders. Since there were only 2 bedrooms in the house, Olupo decided to move into his father's room, leaving his own room for Nwani. It was a weekend, and Olupo was home, while Aiga was away on his bricklaying gigs. Nwani began her duties around the house, asking Olupo for help to find some essentials around the house. They slowly started communicating and smiling at each other. That evening, Olupo walked into the bathroom to wash up, but as he opened the door, his heart raced. There, standing in the middle of the room, was Nwani, completely unaware of his presence, bathing. Her skin glistened with the water. She was hot, with a slender Coca-Cola bottle body. Both froze in shock. "I'm sorry," Olupo stammered, quickly backing out, his heart pounding. Nwani was equally startled, pulling a towel around herself, feeling embarrassed. From that day on, an unspoken connection grew between them. Over the next few weeks, their stolen glances turned into quiet flirting. They found themselves drawn to each other, caught in a dance of attraction that neither had the courage to fully explore. But it was there, strong, undeniable, and dangerous. Late one night, Aiga lay in bed, waiting for Olupo to return from the kitchen where he had gone to fetch a glass of water. The night was silent, but as minutes passed, he heard something else, a banging sound coming from Olupo's room. Curious, Aiga got up and walked to the door, looking through the keyhole. His heart stopped. There on Olupo's bed were Nwani and Olupo, their bodies intertwined, getting intimate with each other. His eyes were glued to Nwani's form, her skin glowing in the dim light, and something primal stirred inside him. Sweat formed on his forehead as anger and jealousy filled his chest. How could his son experience such sweetness while he, Aiga, remained faithful, waiting for his wife? Aiga stormed back to his room, fuming. He lay down, pretending to be asleep, When Olupo finally returned. "Why did you take so long?" Aiga asked, feigning ignorance. "Oh, I had a bad stomach. I went to the toilet too," Olupo mumbled, shifting uncomfortably. Aiga said nothing, but in his heart, he made a dark vow. He would have Ntakwani for himself. He couldn't let Olupo, an amateur with no experience, have all the fun. The next day, as the sun bathed the house in golden light, Olupo and Ntakwani sat in the kitchen, laughing and chatting like lovebirds. Aiga, walking into the kitchen, felt a sharp pang of jealousy as he watched them together. His anger simmered beneath his calm expression. "Olupo," Aiga barked, "I need you to go to the shop. Here is a list." He handed his son a long sheet of paper filled with items they didn't even need. Olupo looked at the list, confused. "But we already have all this, Dad. There's no point in wasting the money Mom sends us." Ntakwani chimed in, her voice soft but insistent. "I can go instead, sir. It's no trouble." Aiga's eyes widened. "Shut up, Ntakwani," he snapped, startling both of them. He turned to Olupo, his voice raising. "The prices will go up soon. That's why we need to stock, and you need to learn to listen to your father. Now go, before I lose my patience." Olupo glanced at Ntakwani, who nodded silently, and left the house, muttering to himself about his father's strange temper as he walked towards the village shop. Once Olupo was gone, Aiga set his plan into motion. His heart raced with a twisted excitement. He undressed, lying on his bed, and called out sweetly, "Ntakwani, bring me some tea." Ntakwani, sensing something was wrong, hesitated. She asked whether to bring the tea to the bedroom or leave it at the dining, but Aiga shouted, telling her to take it to the bedroom. She nervously prepared the tea, her hands trembling as she walked to his bedroom door. Knocking gently, she waited for his response. "Come in," Aiga said, his voice soft but unsettling. As Ntakwani pushed open the door, her eyes widened in shock. There, lying on the bed, was Aiga, completely naked. The tray slipped from her hands and the tea crashed to the floor, burning her leg. Aiga rose slowly, moving closer to her. "Don't be scared," he whispered, a sick smile on his face. "I'll pay you for your services. It's just between us." Ntakwani took a step back, her voice trembling. "No, sir, I can't do this." Aiga's face twisted with rage. "Why? You slept with my son, but you can't sleep with me? You're just a maid, Ntakwani. You do as you're told." Tears filled Ntakwani's eyes as she turned to run in fear, but Aiga lunged forward, grabbing her by the throat. In his fury, he strangled her, his hands tightening as she gasped for air. "How dare you, a mere maid, reject me?" Moments later, her body fell limp in his grasp. Aiga stood over her lifeless body, his heart pounding. He stared at his hands, suddenly realizing what he had done, stepping back in horror. Just then, Olupo came back from the shop, calling out as he entered the house. "Dad, the shop was closed. I'll have to go back tomorrow." He pushed open the bedroom door and froze. There on the bed sat his father, next to Ntakwani's lifeless body. His heart pounded in his chest as he stammered, "What happened?" Aiga looked up, his eyes wild. I caught her stealing," he lied quickly. "She tried to take money from us, and I didn't mean to. It was an accident." "Stealing?" Olupo asked. He couldn't believe that the girl he loved had been stealing. Aiga stood up, his voice raising. "Are you questioning me?" "She was a thief." The room fell silent as Olupo's mind raced. "Olupo, you have to help me. We need to bury her before anyone finds out about this." At first, Olupo shook his head, horrified by the thought. "No, Dad, I can't. This isn't right." But Aiga grabbed him by the shoulder, his voice pleading. "Please, son, it was an accident. I never meant for this to happen. Help me, for the sake of the family." After a long pause, Olupo reluctantly agreed. Together, They dug a shallow grave behind the house, burying Ntakwani in the cold, hard soil. As they were finishing, the sound of a vehicle pulling up startled them. It was Niga, returning home from the city. Panic surged through Aiga as he hissed to Olupo, Go welcome her, I'll finish here." Olupo wiped his dirty hands on his trousers and passed through the back door to greet his mother, his heart heavy with guilt. Niga stepped out of the van with a wide smile, her arms filled with shopping bags. "Olupo!" she exclaimed, hugging him tightly. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, Mom," Olupo replied, forcing a smile. Niga stepped back, eyeing his dirty clothes. "Why are you so dirty?" Thinking quickly, Olupo mumbled, I was helping Dad with some bricklaying work. We've just come back." Niga smiled, feeling proud. "Oh, my son is all grown up now." Just then, Aiga approached, his face strained but smiling. "We weren't expecting you back so soon." Niga grinned. "I got a 1-month holiday to spend Christmas with my family." "Where is Ntakwani?" "I bought some chicken for her to cook." Olupo and Aiga's heart skipped a beat, but Aiga quickly recovered. "Oh, we gave her a Christmas holiday. She went back to her family." Niga raised her eyebrows surprised. "Hey, you didn't tell me." "Well, then the two of you will cook the chicken. I'm exhausted." As Niga walked inside, Aiga and Olupo exchanged a tense glance, knowing they had a secret to keep. Later that evening, the family gathered for dinner. They ate in silence at first, but soon the familiar warmth returned, and they laughed and joked together. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. The sound was sharp and unexpected, cutting through the air like a knife. Aiga and Olupo exchanged nervous glances. Niga noticed their tension. "Won't one of you open the door?" she asked, but Aiga and Olupo remained seated, frozen in space. Niga got up, opened the door and looked around, but there was no one. "Who is there?" she called, stepping outside, but there was no response. She shut the door, shrugging. "There is no one." Aiga and Olupo breathed a sigh of relief, but the tension in the air remained thick. That night, Olupo couldn't bring himself to sleep in his room. The thought of being alone in Ntakwani's former space sent chills down his spine. "I think I'll sleep with you both tonight," Olupo said, trying to sound casual. "It's been a while since we've all been together." Niga smiled warmly. "Of course, my boy, you're always welcome." Aiga, understanding the real reason, nodded silently. The three of them settled into bed, but none of them would sleep soundly. At 2 a.m., Aiga suddenly shook them awake. "Do you hear that?" They all listened. The unmistakable sound of utensils clattering came from the kitchen, as if someone was washing dishes. "What is that?" Niga asked, sitting up. "Someone's in the kitchen." Aiga and Olupo exchanged terrified looks. "Stay here," Niga said, starting to get out of bed, but both men grabbed her arms. "No," Aiga whispered, his voice shaky. "Don't go. Stay here. It might be a thief." The clattering stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, footsteps began to echo slowly, approaching their bedroom. They held each other tightly, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. The door burst open, and Aiga and Olupo screamed in unison. "Ntakwani!" Niga looked at them baffled. "What are you talking about? There is no one here. You said Ntakwani was off for holiday." But Aiga continued pointing at the door, his body trembling. "She's here! She's right there!" he shouted, his voice shaky. Only Aiga could see Ntakwani's spirit, standing in the doorway, her figure dimly illuminated. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and anger, and her voice was hoarse, a result of strangulation. "Confess, or you and Olupo will suffer until the end." Aiga shook his head violently. "No, it can't be. You're not real." Niga and Olupo looked at him in shock, saying there was no one there. "What are you saying? She's right there," Aiga shouted, pointing nervously at the door. But Niga and Olupo couldn't see anyone. Aiga then realized he was the only one seeing Nwani because of the crime he committed against her. He then smiled and pretended, saying he was just pranking them. But Nwani's spirit lingered, her presence undeniable to him. The weight of her demand pressed on his soul like an unbearable burden. Weeks passed, and Aiga's health deteriorated rapidly. His head began swelling, day by day, almost the size of 3 watermelons. He became bedridden, and he mumbled incoherently in his sleep, constantly begging for Nwani to leave him alone. His eyes, once sharp and full of pride, now darted around fearfully, always expecting to see her spirit in the shadows. Olupo too was not spared. His legs swelled unnaturally, making it difficult for him to walk. No matter what he tried, it only worsened. Niga, confused and scared, took both of them to the hospital. But after numerous tests, the doctor shook his head. "There's nothing wrong with them," he said, bewildered. "All their results are normal." Niga was left more confused than ever. As they returned home, she noticed that Olupo was avoiding eye contact, his guilt barely concealed. "Olupo, is there something you're not telling me?" she asked softly, watching him closely. Olupo's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained silent, afraid of what might happen if he spoke the truth. As they sat at home, there was a knock on the door. Niga went to open it, and standing there were Nwani's parents, their faces filled with concern. "We haven't heard from Nwani in weeks," her mother said. "She always calls us, but now it's been too long. Is she all right?" Niga, caught off guard, forced a smile. "Oh, yes, she went home for Christmas holiday." "Hasn't she arrived yet?" Before Nwani's parents could respond, Olupo, standing behind Niga, blurted out, "She ran away after stealing money from us. We haven't seen her since." Niga's head snapped towards her son, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" she whispered. The contradicting stories confused her, and the shock was clear on Nwani's parents' faces. "Our Nwani would never steal," her father said. "Please, if you hear anything, let us know." Niga nodded numbly as they left, their steps heavy with disappointment. Once the door closed, Niga turned to Olupo. "What are you talking about, Olupo?" she demanded, her voice cold. "Tell me the truth now." Olupo sighed, the weight of his guilt suffocating him. "I was sleeping with Nwani," he admitted. "And father, he told me she was stealing, and that's why he killed her. That's all I know." Niga's heart sank as she tried to process the information. Her son's legs swelled even more, a clear sign that he wasn't telling the whole truth. She pressed on him. "Olupo, you're still lying. If that's the truth, why is your leg worsening?" But Olupo insisted, saying that's what his father had told him. Desperate for answers, Niga visited a witch doctor. The old woman listened carefully as Niga explained her situation, nodding slowly before handing her a small bottle of bathing potion. "This will reveal the truth," the witch doctor said. "When you use it, you will see what you need to see." Back at home, Niga bathed with the potion, waiting anxiously. At first, nothing happened. She began to think it was all a waste of time and money. But then, as the minutes passed, a cold chill swept over the room. Suddenly, Nwani appeared before her, her ghostly figure shimmering in the dim light. "Nwani," Niga gasped, stepping back. "Don't be scared. I'm here to tell you what really happened," Nwani said. She told Niga everything, how Aiga tried to force himself on her, the lies, her tragic death, and how Olupo helped him cover up the murder. "They must confess to the village, or they will die," Nwani warned, her voice echoing. Niga confronted Olupo with the truth, and he was shocked. "Father told me she was stealing. I didn't know he was lying," Olupo said. Aiga, now bedridden on the brink of death, groaned in pain. His head had reached its elastic limit, and the next hour it would burst open. Niga, furious, dragged her husband to the police station. "You coward! You murderer! she screamed at him, her voice filled with anger and disgust. "You destroyed our family. You killed an innocent girl, and now you're paying the price. I should just let you die, but you dragged my son into this mess." Villagers had already gathered around to witness the drama. At the police station, Ntakwani's parents were already there, reporting about their missing daughter. Aiga, too weak to resist, finally confessed everything. "I killed her," he said, his voice barely audible. "I strangled her in a fit of rage. I don't know what came over me. She didn't deserve to die. I was jealous of my son. I wanted to sleep with Ntakwani, but she rejected me." As soon as the confession left his lips, his head slowly began to shrink back to its normal size. Olupo's swollen leg also began to heal. Ntakwani's parents, devastated by the truth, cried out in anguish, asking why it had to happen to their daughter. Her father slapped Aiga hard across the face. They turned to Niga, asking whether she could see Ntakwani. Their eyes filled with tears. Niga nodded, pointing to where Ntakwani's spirit stood, watching over them. Though they couldn't see her, they could feel her presence. "Tell them I love them. Tell them I'm at peace now." Ntakwani spoke her final message. Her parents cried harder as Niga delivered the message, clutching each other as the villagers who had gathered around began to weep as well. The pain of losing their daughter was immense, but knowing she was finally at rest brought them some comfort. Niga watched as Ntakwani's spirit faded away, a peaceful smile on her face. Her work was done, and she could finally rest. Aiga, now handcuffed, was taken to show the place where he and Olupo had buried Ntakwani, behind their house. He was then arrested and taken to prison. Olupo, though spared from the worst punishment, was not entirely free. He was sentenced to community service, cleaning trenches and rubbish throughout the village. He was also expelled from school for his involvement. As Niga watched her son labor through his punishment, she couldn't believe how much her family had fallen apart. Her husband, the man she trusted, had betrayed her in the worst way imaginable, just because he wanted 20 seconds of enjoyment. The decision to leave the village came soon after. There was nothing left for them there but the memories of a dark past. They sold their house, packed up their belongings, and headed back to the city. Niga, determined to give Olupo a fresh start, enrolled him in the school where she worked. Despite his past, she managed to secure him a scholarship, hoping that this would be his chance to rebuild his life. In the city, life was different. The pace was faster, and there were few familiar faces to remind Olupo of his mistake. But the guilt didn't fade. Over the years, Olupo turned his life around, becoming a counselor who inspired others to live with honesty and integrity. Niga found peace, knowing that her son had learned from their tragic past. Aiga remained in prison, paying the price for his actions. Ntakwani's spirit finally rested as justice was served, and the family moved forward with a renewed sense of purpose. What do you think of this story, guys? Did you like this story? Please leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I post new videos. Stay tuned for my next video, guys. Thank you for watching.